Hi, everyone, and welcome to IDG Live, or if you're watching back a little bit later on the other channel, welcome to In Deep Sleep. This is a pre-recorded live stream, so if you are watching this as live, then I'm not live. It will still be like a normal live stream, though. There will be the chat set up. I'm going to set this up as a premiere, and so feel free to dive into the comments as usual. I will try my very best to pop in as well into the chat just to say hi to everyone. But what we've got today is Dragonbinder. We're going to be talking about Dragonbinder. And this is something which didn't appear in the TV show, but has appeared in the books. And the way George R. Martin has written this, we'll get into this in a moment, is very much setting up the idea that this is potentially game-changing. This is hugely magical. This is very powerful. And at the moment, not many people know it's there. But it's first introduced in the Kingsmoot over on the Iron Islands on Aldwick. And the situation is that all of the ship captains kind of gather, and at a Kingsmoot, then the different candidates put forth their case and give out gifts and bribes, and the captains that support one person shout out their name, the captains that support another shout out their name. Eventually some people kind of bow out, they realize they've not got enough support, and at some point the support of everyone rallies around one person. And where we've got to, still relatively early in proceedings, we've got two leading candidates. We've got Asher and we've got Victarion, and their captains are each kind of shouting out their names. And through that, the hubbub is broken by the sound of this horn being blown. And George R. R. Martin writes it just onomatopoeically, in capital letters, the "ow" sound of this horn that just kind of breaks everything that's going on. All of the conversations, all of the arguments are just overtaken by the sound of this horn. And this is what we read. It's being blown by this guy called Cragorn, who's this immense kind of warrior type kind of guy, big tattoos everywhere, really strong. The horn he blew was shiny, black, and twisted, and taller than a man as he held it with both hands. It was bound about with bands of red gold and dark steel, incised with ancient Valyrian glyphs that seemed to glow redly as the sound swelled. Drowned God to raise a mighty way. Aaron here asked for the wish that the drowned god could raise a mighty wave and smash the horn to silence, and yet still the shriek went on and on. It is the horn of hell, he wanted to scream, though no man would have heard him. The cheeks of the tattooed man were so puffed out that they looked about to burst, and the muscles in his chest twitched in a way that made it seem as if the bird, the tattoo, were about to rip free of his flesh and take wing. And now the glyphs were burning brightly. Every line and letter shimmered with white fire. On and on the sound went, echoing amongst the howling hills behind them and across the waters of Naga's Cradle to ring against the mountains of Great Wick, and on and on and on until it filled the whole wet world. And that is how this is induced. The sound, we're told later, this is like 1,000 shrieks in your mind. It's unearthly. Incidentally, we're not given the name Dragonbinder here. It's just the hell horn. That's the feel that we've got going on here. And this breaks the entire discussion that's happened. Everybody's then looking at Euron, who emerges and then starts to basically make his pitch. And he sort of explains partway through that horn, I got that from old Valyria. Only I could go there. I got that horn. That horn can claim dragons. It can control dragons. And that's what we're going to do. I'm going to get dragons, and we're going to take not only the Iron Islands, but all of Westeros. And so immediately you're seeing his vision, which is way bigger than that of the other captains. And he kind of backs this up by getting these chests of loot that he's got from his travels, and then just throwing them to the floor, and then people are just coming and grabbing whatever they want. And we get this list of what was in those chests, and It's astonishing, way beyond anything that anyone else could offer as bribes, effectively, including like Valyrian steel daggers and things like that, just casually left lying on the floor for people to claim. This, through it all, the Hellhorn is the thing that people remember. Asha later, she thinks back, that sound, that was the thing that ruined all of her ambitions. Aaron thinks pretty much the same. This was the moment in the Kingsmoot. Now, I've got behind me here, I've got the Kingsmoot from the TV show. The Kingsmoot in the books is just another level up. And the Dragonbinder, the dragon horn, the Valyrian horn, that was the center point. That was the thing that everyone remembered from it. But after that, it kind of sort of disappears from the narrative a bit until Euron has given it to Victarion. Now, we're told that it can bind dragons to its will. It is described as being the dragon horn. We're told also, looking back, Cragorn, that guy who blew it, he died. His lips were blistering even as he was doing it. We heard about blood was dripping from the tattoo on him. Apparently, afterwards, they discovered that his lungs had turned to ash blowing that horn. It is set up as being this astonishingly powerful thing, but clearly the person who blew it and the sound carried across, all the way across to other islands. The person who blew it, they died. So incredibly powerful, but he gives it to Victarion. Victarion, he's sending on a mission. We're not given all of the ins and outs of exactly what he's told to do, but he's basically given a mission to go get Dany and bring her back because Euron wants Dany as his bride, and while he's at it, you can get the dragons. Now, he gives Victarion a sort of an incentive. He says, okay, you go off, you do this, and after we've conquered the world, I will be the king of Westeros and you can be the king of the Iron Islands. And he gives Euron Dragonbinder. He also gives her what's known as the Dusky Woman, who is a female companion for him. She's had her tongue cut out in the way that Euron does. And the two things we need to understand, we'll dig into this a little bit more in a moment, but the two things you really have to understand, because George R. R. Martin labors them a lot, is that firstly, all of Euron's gifts are poisonous. Victarion himself thinks this again and again and again, and he thinks about the Dusky Woman, and he thinks this is a gift from Euron. All of Euron's gifts are poisonous, and the Hellhorn, this is a gift from Euron. All of Euron's gifts are poisonous. But the second thing we have to remember is that George R. R. Martin, when he was describing Victarion, he called him, and this is a direct quote, thick as a stump. So he has set him up. He's very good at fighting. He's very good at winning battles for the Ironborn, but that's pretty much the only thing he is good at. Critical thinking is not his strong point. So he knows that these gifts from Euron are poisonous, but he doesn't really do anything about it. Thick as a stump. He does, however, when he rescues Moqorro from the water. Moqorro is the Black Flame. He's the Red Priest who's been sent from Volantis down to Daenerys in Slaver's Bay, and his mission is basically to support her, to guide her. They've decided, the Red Priests, Priest of R'hllor, have decided that Daenerys is Azor Ahai reborn, and so they're sending one of their own down there, and that's Moqorro. And Victarion shows the Hellhorn to Moqorro. And Moqorro can read Valyrian, so he can read the glyphs and things on the side of it. And this is where we get a list of some things that it says. One of them is "I am Dragonbinder," and this is incidentally, the only time we have the word Dragonbinder in the entire book. No one refers to it as Dragonbinder except itself. Everyone calls it Hellhorn or whatever. But here we're told it says, "I am Dragonbinder." Then it also says, "No mortal man shall sound me and live." It says, "Blood for fire, fire for blood." Now, Mokoro then kind of summarizes this. He says, "You've seen this being blown before?" And Victarion explains what happened. And Mokoro goes, "Yeah, that's right. You must not blow it. Because whoever blows it will die. That's what this means. Blood for fire, fire for blood. No mortal man shall sound me and live." You get your magic, you get your fire, the dragon, but it requires blood sacrifice. And the blood sacrifice seems to be whoever is blowing on that hellhorn. And then he says, "The dragons will come to the horn's master." And he doesn't kind of unpack that. George R. Martin does this quite a lot. He starts giving us really interesting information and then he kind of ends the chapter. But we have this idea that the dragons will come to the horn's master, not the person who blows the horn. And he sort of says, you must claim the horn with blood. Now, what does this mean? This clearly means that the horn itself, the person blowing it, will die, but the horn will be bonded to its master in some way, through blood, through some magical means, and it is then the master who can then control the dragon. The blowing of the horn seems to be the binding, the controlling, but then because you have bound yourself to the horn, it's like here's the horn, you're bound to the horn, the dragon's bound to the horn, and then you get control over the dragon. That seems to be the way this works. Now, we don't see what happens next, but we do get in a pre-release chapter for the Winds of Winter, we've got a Victarion chapter from there, which George R. Martin has been very clear. These are pre-release chapters, but they are not necessarily the final version of those pre-release chapters. He has gone back and rewritten at least one of them, so we shouldn't take this as absolute canon yet. But this seems about right. It's quite a short chapter, what we have, but it seems about right, in that what Victarion does is he then, as they're heading towards Slaver's Bay, there's going to be a battle when we get there. He summons 3 slaves and he says, "Okay, I want you each to blow this horn when we get there." And they're a little bit, but the last person who blew this horn died. And Victarion's comes out with what's actually for him quite a clever line. It says, "Yes, but he blew that horn 3 times. And that's why he died. You each are just going to blow it once each, and that's it. So you probably won't die. You might, but we're going to a war, we're going to a battle, people die in battles anyway, so, you take your chances. You could be in the battle and die, you could be here and you've got a chance of living. And if you blow that horn, then I'll free you, I'll set you up, give you a little bit of land, you can make a name for yourself." Now, underlying all of this is Victarion's thinking, they're stupid, they're slaves, they're going to do what I tell them to do, or otherwise I'll kill them, and they're probably going to die anyway. So he's thinking he's very clever about this, but it does work. As far as we can tell, they all go, "All right, I'll do this." So they all then shuffle out. And then Mokoro is left there with the Dusky Woman and with Victarion, and Mokoro says, "Should I bleed you?" Which is an interesting line, because the implication, this is like oldie worldy healing stuff, is that you bleed someone just to sort of help balance the humours or whatever. I'm sure people in the chat will be able to describe exactly how that was supposed to work. But he says, no, the Dusky Woman can do that, which immediately brings the Dusky Woman into this equation, because we know that we have to, the last time we heard about Victarion's blood, he had to use his blood to bind himself to Dragonbinder, and now we have the Dusky Woman, who he is trusting to be cutting him and taking and using his blood for whatever reason. Why is this important? Because all of Euron's gifts are poisonous, and she is a gift from Euron. Almost certainly, we're not going to go into this in huge amounts of detail in this stream, but almost certainly Euron is at the very least being able to see what and hear what's happening through her. So what is all this being set up for? The details of that is what we're going to be looking at during this stream. But clearly, first of all, George R. R. Martin is telling us that this is powerful. This is big. This is important. This completely overshone everything in the King's Moot as far as the participants were concerned. The sound of it is something that still seems to be ringing in their ears. It's hugely powerful. And it is obviously set up here as being able to control dragons. And it is being taken to where dragons are. So we're having a setup for a hugely powerful ancient Valyrian artifact. There doesn't seem to be much doubt, yes, this is a genuine Valyrian artifact that will be used in an attempt to control the dragons. Now, we're also told this is tricksy in some way. It definitely kills the people who blow the horn. There's a matter of who is the master or the owner of the horn. So Euron has a plan. Victarion has his own cunning plan that Euron's probably aware of already. And then we have Moqorro, who in all of this is very much wanting to be supporting Dany. And the last thing he will want is for Azor Ahai Reborn to lose one or two or three of her dragons. So he is going to be working against both of those plans. And in the middle of all of that, we get the Dusky Woman, who is probably some kind of plant from Euron. So that is all to come. It would not surprise me if we get a chapter from Victarion's perspective of him with the fighting, but also with the horn being blown. So we hear the horn being blown. He may well go into fight and then trust them to be doing the things, because he's not the brightest of people. Trust the hornblowers to be doing their thing, but perhaps maybe even leaving the Dusky Woman and Moqorro there on board. Who knows? So that's where we're leading up to. And in all of this, I think we have to remember, this seems to me to be one of the classic examples of what George R. R. Martin talks about almost every time when he talks about magic. In his mind, magic is dangerous. Magic isn't something that you can control. Magic is something that will give you unexpected results, and often not very good results, not the results you want. It may deliver the things you're wanting, but not in the ways that you're wanting. And so he has set this up so that particularly Victarion is almost certainly not going to get what he wants from this. But also the magic should be beyond, in some way, the control of the other people there. So that is where George R. R. Martin is pitching this. It's big, it's powerful, and it's going to have an impact on this story going forward. So I will answer some questions. I asked for some questions from my patrons. This might be a slightly shorter live stream than usual, but I'm going to pick up all of these. If you have any other questions, what I think I will do is, if you put them down in the comments, I'm going to go back in the comments from the pre-recorded live streams like this, and then I'll just do an open Q&A pre-recorded live stream with all of those questions answered. So if you've got any further questions, drop them down in the comments below, and I will pick up on them for next time. So Orion's Orcas saying, Robert, do you truly believe that Euron would give Dragonbinder to Victarion? I can't see him giving something supposedly that powerful to anyone. If it did indeed work, he would want to blow that horn himself. Do you agree? Or do you have a different take on the subject? By the way, I think Euron is twisted and evil and hate this character more than any other in the books. Well, I entirely sympathize with your view of Euron. Um, uh, No, is the short answer. This is not Euron giving Victarion the power to control dragons. That much is very clear. Euron's not going to blow this. If he thought he could get away with doing that, I suspect he would have done that at the King's Moot. The fact that he got someone else to blow it is I think evidence for me that Euron knows that if you blow that horn, then you will die. But he did not give that information to Victarion. So he has sent Victarion off. He knows Victarion. He knows him very well, and he is playing him. He has sent him off with the Hellhorn, knowing that Victarion is almost certainly going to try and double cross him, and expecting that. He is expecting Victarion to use that to try to control the dragons. However, and we don't know all the ins and outs of exactly how the magic works here. However, my best understanding is that Euron has already bound the Dragonbinder to himself through blood magic in some way. And so his thinking is that when either Victarion himself blows it or he gets someone else to blow it, it does not matter, because who blows that Hellhorn, it makes no difference, because it's the bond between the Hellhorn and its master that matters. So Euron's plan is that if Victarion never figures out how to read those glyphs on the side, then he may well blow the Hellhorn himself, in which case he will kill himself, but the dragons will be claimed and they will fly over to me. Or maybe he'll get somebody else to do it and think that he's ever so clever, but still he'll blow the horn and the dragons will fly back to me. So that, I think, is Euron's plan. His plan is, at a very kind of high level, Victarion will not resist wanting to blow that horn and control the dragons, and that will actually bring them all the way over to him. While he has been it's kind of like slowing down the pace of things over in the southwest of Westeros. He has been raiding a lot of very small places, and he's been hanging out on islands for a little while. He's not been taking the attack to places like Old Town yet. The Red Wine Fleet are coming to join in an attack on Euron, but they seem to have been caught by some unfavorable winds. And we know one of the things that Euron seems to be able to do is, we're told, control the winds. So maybe he is just slowing the pace of everything so that the battle he's going to have happens either at the same time as the Battle of Fire over outside Meereen, and therefore when the horn is blown, or so that the horn can be blown first and the dragons can fly over and he can have those dragons in his control for the forthcoming battle. Now, if he wants everything to happen at the same time, that would absolutely, I don't know if this is how George R. Martin is doing this, but this would absolutely fit in with this idea that we have of Euron as being just creating chaos, destroying everything, because he has set up this kind of magical apocalypsy horror show of a sea battle. He's all the way over in the west. He has strapped priests, magic users, even his own unborn baby being carried by his lover to the front of the boats of his ship, knowing that they will be doing whatever magic they would still do, so trying to summon things, trying to perform magic, and also many of them probably being killed, sacrificed, creating this huge blood sacrifice. All of the imagery is that perhaps he's wanting to summon krakens from the deep. Could you imagine a battle in which he's created such huge sacrifice, such kind of a magical vortex going on all around him? Krakens emerge to the surface, and then dragons appear and take his side. And that is where this idea of him being this kind of god, not just a king, but a god, that's what he's aiming to be. He can control all of these astonishing creatures. So that's just one kind of route that George R. R. Martin could go down with this. But whichever way he plays it, Euron has given that to Victarion for the simple reason that he thinks it is going to be taken over to Meereen and blown, and he will then have control of those dragons. Stephen saying, "Hi, Robert and Dan. Given the mysterious and dangerous nature of magic, could Dragonbinder have an unexpected effect on Dany's dragons, perhaps changing them or making them more powerful?" I ask because of a narrative issue with the dragons. One of the reasons that George R. R. Martin originally planned for a 5-year time gap in their story was to give the dragons more time to grow. Without that, they will presumably be too young and small when it is time for them to go to Westeros. So maybe Dragonbinder will be a device within the story to empower the dragons and make them ready in time. I mean, taking the first part there, will this have some unexpected effect? Quite possibly. We don't know all of everything it says on the side. We're only told the things that Moqorro decided he wanted to tell to Victarion. Victarion, again, not the sharpest tool in the toolbox. He didn't you can read these. What does that one mean? What does that one mean? What does that one mean? He just waited for Moqorro to tell him a few things, and then, okay. We don't know. Even if it does announce everything it does on the side, we don't know everything it does do. Instinctively, I think that binding a dragon, however that works, whatever that means, because we don't dragon binder. How does that actually mean? Are you literally just kind of binding it in some way, or are you binding it to a person? Can they control it from that moment forward? Does it create a dragon bond? We don't know any of these kind of things. But it would seem to me that is a pretty powerful thing to have wrapped up magically within a horn already. To then say, and also make that dragon immensely more powerful, grow that dragon quite quickly. I think that's just taking it on perhaps one step too far. You make, I think, an excellent point, which is that this 5-year time gap, I mentioned this quite a lot, because the original plan from George R. R. Martin was to have a 5-year time gap. And you can see that in the way that he structured a lot of these. Many of his characters are in places that they could happily sit there for 5 years, just leveling up slowly in the background. Sam can go down to Old Town and train to be a maester. Arya can be in Braavos and train to be a faceless man, and Jon can be learning how to be Lord Commander of the Night's Watch. He's put people in places where they could theoretically stay. And he wanted that because he wanted the main characters to age up, because some of the main characters are still actually very young, and because he wanted the dragons to grow so that they would be large enough to be very impressive when they came to Westeros. So he decided not to do that because, among other reasons, he realized there were some characters, specifically Cersei, who could not just sit around for 5 years. That just would not work within stay true to those characters. So he eventually abandoned it, although he kind of structured his way up towards that point. He abandoned the idea. So you're left with a problem of characters who might be too young. And I think instinctively what we've got the older characters are probably old enough. They might still feel a little young to be doing the things that they're doing, but they're probably old enough to do stuff. But it means that some of the very young characters like Rickon, we probably shouldn't expect to take on a particularly proactive role going forward. Which is probably just another nail in the coffin for Rickon, to be honest. But sometimes he's kind of seems to have, when he couldn't get around that, he seems to have created a new character to fill some of the roles, like Dark Star, for example, to fill some of the roles that he wanted a younger character to have in 5 years' time. But the dragons is an issue because he's got these dragons who, they only hatched at the end of book 1, so we're by the time we pick up on sort of book 6, I mean, we've got 18-month, 2-year-old dragons now. We've basically got Drogon, who, and I think this is the hint to how he's going to work his way around this, because he hasn't given us all of the dragon lore about how dragons grow, but he has given us the clue that Drogon was the dragon that wasn't constricted, wasn't chained up. Drogon could fly around, ate whatever sheep or anyone that he wanted. He could just live a proper dragony life. And Drogon grew more than the other 2 dragons. Those other 2 dragons are now free. So I suspect he will come to some kind of workaround where it's like a dragon can grow at the pace at which it can embrace its dragonishness and eat stuff, specifically humans. It needs to be eating things in order to be getting their strength and energy to grow. Drogon is going to go off into the Dothraki Sea. Almost certainly is going to be killing quite a lot of Dothraki and the like while he's there. He will continue growing. He is going to be large enough. The other 2 have got a whole battle, the Siege of Meereen. There've been the visuals of this are great. Is that the Yunkish with their big catapults, I think they're trebuchet, firing dead bodies into the city, and the dragons are flying above and then just like coming out and like that and just grabbing the bodies before they can go and eating them. And there will be many dead bodies on the ground afterwards, after the battle, and they will almost certainly consume them as well. So I think the workaround that George R. R. Martin is going to come up with is, if you give the dragons a year, 18 months, 2 years even, of being completely free, of being able to eat whatever they want, they will grow so much faster than if you're actually keeping them locked away in somewhere like the Dragon Pit, for example. That did kind of slow the growth of some of the dragons, because of what dragons need to be is free. They don't roam, for those who are wondering about George R. R. Martin's blog post. He's not saying they roam off other places, but within their little area, if they're free to eat what they want, fly when they want, they will manage their own growth and they will get much bigger. So I think it's a really interesting point, but I think he probably has another workaround in mind. Claire Island saying, hello, Robert. Hi. I hope you and Dan are well. We are, thank you. I don't think that Dragonbinder will be with Euron at Old Town. I do think that Sam will survive and ultimately leave. It's possible that Sam might learn about Dragonbinder without seeing it, possibly before the battle, possibly after fleeing the city. What are the chances this happens? And it leads Sam to a leap of understanding about the Horn of Winter. Well, I agree. I don't think Dragonbinder will go to Old Town. Euron sent it out on the ship. It's gone over to Slaver's Bay. It's at Meereen. I think it will end up in Dany's control somehow. Moqorro will give it to her, something like that. So she will have Dragonbinder. And that, however, isn't the important point, because the important point is that it's who Dragonbinder is bound to, and whether or not Euron is clever enough to have made it bound to him, and you can't undo that magic. If so, then game over for his ambitions. But if he does manage to, say, claim a dragon, then yes, someone as clever as Sam would be going, well, how on earth did that happen? Whether he will have time to be hunting through the archives in Old Town, I'm not sure. I think the more I think on Sam in Old Town, the more I I kind of come to the conclusion one of two things has to happen because he is there to learn. That's the whole point. And so either Euron doesn't manage to destroy Old Town. Maybe this is all one great big feint. Maybe he's pretending to attack Old Town, but really he's going to go into Highgarden, something like that. That's possible. Or Sam his time there is going to be really cut short. He's not going to have time to be earning chains to become a partial maester. You can even the fastest can only earn 3 chains in a year, and Sam is pretty clever, but 3 chains in a year is probably what it. How long until Old Town gets attacked by Euron? Maybe a couple of years. He's only going to get 6 links maximum in that time. So, might he learn something about Dragonbinder? Well, yes. He has got an ancient war horn with him as well. Um, I think the key thing for him is that he does not think that that's a magical war horn at all. At all, he just thinks this is some old keepsake that he's got from the wall to remind himself of what was there. That he couldn't sell it for any money in Bravos, so he's kept hold of this. And what will change his mind on that is perhaps reading a book about the Horn of Winter and hearing it's like that. Now, might his thinking of that go down a particular path because he goes, so I've heard a rumor Euron has managed to claim a dragon. How did he do that? Well, I heard other rumors about this magical horn that was blown at the King's Moot. Oh, so you've got powerful horns, and he starts reading a book about that, and it's called Powerful Horns of the World or whatever. And then he goes, oh, and then there's the Horn of Winter. The description of that sounds very similar. Is that possible that could all work through? Yeah, I think that's absolutely possible. Is it likely? I mean, I think you have to put a limit on what Sam can learn down there because time is going to be at a premium. I would give him maximum a year in Old Town before he has to start making his way back up north. What can he learn in that time? We know that there's various subplots going on the Faceless Banner down there as well. We've got Alalas, lots of things going on. So what can he learn? Perhaps George R. R. Martin will drop the idea of him learning about Jon's parentage from down there. That's possible. Will he learn a bit more about Dragonglass, Valyrian Steel? That seems likely. At some point, I think someone needs to understand about the Horn of Winter. Who's going to do that? Instinctively, that feels more like Bran, who can go back in time and see the Horn of Winter. And from there, he can go, and that's that thing. That's instinctively. So, but I wouldn't rule it out. Sam will learn stuff. Whether he learns about the Horn of Winter from there, I'm not 100% sure yet. Lady Vaughan-Strauss saying, hello, hope you're well. What do you think that Dragonbinder suggests about blood magic and the use of it in old Valyria? Well, this is a really interesting question because on one hand, it doesn't tell us huge amounts because Fire and Blood, we already know, all Valyrian magic was based on Fire and Blood. This is about Fire and Blood. It's about sacrifice. Basically, you have to make a sacrifice, the person blowing the horn, in order to get the power of the dragon. That all seems sort of like we knew before. But there is a big information gap here, which is what was it actually used for? And connected with that, why didn't the Targaryens have one? So we know that this was sort of general knowledge about these horns because Dany even remembers she's there flying on the back of Drogon and she's going, "Oh, I can't fly Drogon." I vaguely remember the Valyrians used to have this magical horns they could use to control dragons. So she's not a reader. George R. Martin's been very clear. She's not a reader of like historic tomes. She will have just been told this by Viserys or somebody else in that circle in her younger years. So it's general information out there. However, we don't hear of the Targaryens having one of these horns. We certainly don't hear them ever using it during their time in Westeros, which, given the fact that the Targaryens left with everything they had, all of the important things, is a bit odd. Because if having a horn like Dragonbinder was necessary, was essential for dragon bonding, then you would have thought that they would have it, and this would be like one of the most central things. And at least one of the learned Targaryens at some point would go, "Oh, that's why we're finding it hard to control dragons. We've now got a dragon horn." But we don't hear about that at all. And the clear implication is that the Targaryens, from a very early time in Westeros, and therefore implicitly earlier than that, they thought all you had to do was like you put a dragon egg in a crib, and then the dragon hatches, and then you kind of form a bond with them. No need for any hellhorns or anything like that. You're forming a bond with the dragon. So why didn't the Targaryens have one of them? I mean, I think there's a few different options. The first is perhaps they are just used for wild dragons. That if you get a dragon that hasn't bonded with anyone and you need to control a dragon because dragons can be quite kind of dangerous, think cannibal here. If you remember your Fire and Blood, think cannibal the dragon. Independent, incredibly dangerous, would eat pretty much anything that came into its cave. Maybe these kind of horns were just used for controlling those dragons. You couldn't bond with them; they'd gone too far because you couldn't approach them. However, you could stand a long way away. You could blow the horn, and that controlled the dragon, and then you could, like, say, go over there. Maybe that's the first use. The second is that maybe, and there might be more than these three I'm about to say, by the way, but let me know your thoughts down in the comments and what you think they were actually used for in Valyria. The second is that they were used for the kind of like the original bonding of a dragon, binding of a dragon to a family, say. You have to use blood magic. You say, okay, this dragon is now bound to this family, so all its descendants will be connected to them. And after that, you have you can do the normal dragon bonding thing that we see with the Targaryens all the time. So each dragon has another generation of eggs, and those are hatched, but they share the same sort of blood bond up to their ancestor that the Valyrians, the Targaryens, who were linked to those dragons, also had. So that's another option. And the third option is that the Targaryens were just a bit different in some way. These were used by many Targaryens to be controlling their dragons. They didn't just have this bond and sort of like this way and that way. It was just like they'll get someone to blow the horn and then make the dragon do a thing. Now, we don't have any particular evidence for that, but at the same time, it is very noticeable the Targaryens who lived in a society that was all about slavery, when they moved away from there, they didn't take that element of it with them. They seemed to be instinctively anti-slavery. And Dany seems to be instinctively anti-slavery. The bond they have with their dragon is not about control, it's about a bond between a human and a dragon, or Valyrian and a dragon. So um, that's a third option, that the Targaryens are just different. They approach things differently to the rest of the Valyrians, which does kind of leave into um, Sir Steve the O, or the Zero perhaps, saying, "Hi Robert, first time question here from South Africa." Well, welcome, first of all, and I hope it all is well in South Africa. The previous question on Dragonbinder versus blood magic: is there any indication that the blood magic used by the Targaryens was unique in Valyria? There doesn't seem to be any reference to Targaryens using horns, other than Daenerys recalling stories of horns being used to tame dragons. And the Targaryen story seems to be tied to blood magic in the sense of genetic hybrid chimera experiments, if that makes sense, whereas the horn seems to be more of an external magic device, although the cost to use it is blood magic, I guess. The use of a horn seems very different from the bond the Targaryens have. Could the Targaryen blood magic be a factor in their exile from Valyria, i.e., trying to usurp the normal Valyrian control over dragons? Um, so this is kind of like playing into exactly what I was just talking about there. So this being kind of a third option, that they're slightly different. They're operating in a different way to the rest of the Valyrians. Now we have to say we've got no indication of this. Nothing that says and the Targaryens were different to the other Valyrians. The Targaryens used a different type of blood magic. There were many reasons why the Targaryens left. Yes, Daenerys the Dreamer had a vision, but also because they really didn't like controlling dragons and controlling humans. We don't get any hint of that, which, yeah, an argument from silence is not strong, but similarly, we can't therefore say that there's much evidence for it. Um, but we do get, and this has been. I've got a video coming out, maybe even tomorrow, on Daenerys the Dreamer, another one of the collaborations with History of Westeros. And in that, we just quickly name check something which happened in House of the Dragon, which it was a kind of a blink and you might have missed it thing. Now, House of the Dragon, I'll say up front, it's not canon, semi-canon at best. But one of the things they did that I really liked, because it just kind of adds to the lore, was that several times they showed us like a book that someone was reading, or a page of a manuscript or something like that. And they did show us at one point something about Daenerys the Dreamer, and it was two accounts. They were similar story written in slightly different ways on two sides of paper, and both of them say that she had this dream about the doom of Valyria the night after she bonded with Balerion the Black Dread. She was the first rider of Balerion the Black Dread. And at the time, he was no larger than a horse, apparently. So that does set up this. It's a rabbit hole, but this kind of thought experiment is that, okay, so perhaps then the Targaryen dragon dreaming comes from the dragon as a bond, which makes you then wonder, okay, so if Daenerys the Dreamer gets it from Balerion, does that mean that other Targaryens who have ridden Balerion got a bond with Balerion? Did they get any kind of weird visions? Well, the next person we know rode Balerion was Aegon the Conqueror, and he definitely got a vision, his Song of Ice and Fire. And then after him, who was Maegor? Well, Maegor got lots of very blinding headaches. Maegor maybe he did, maybe he didn't. Maybe the reason why he was acting so strongly in the way he was because he was obsessed with this idea of having a strong, united Seven Kingdoms, which is what Aegon wanted, and he saw Aenys was not doing that. Viserys I, again in House of the Dragon, he was a dreamer, a dragon dreamer. And then we get Arya Targaryen, who, well, who knows with her, but she was quite a tragic figure. So after she'd bonded with Balerion, we don't really know what happened. But could Balerion therefore be the source of these dragon dreams? And you can go down, and this is pure speculation, but you can then go down this kind of route of saying, well, maybe the answer to that other question that we have to have is that what did none of the other Valyrians get any dreams about the Doom of Valyria? Or did they get them and ignore them? Was it really just Daenerys who got this dream of this most incredibly powerful event that was about to happen? Was it because the Targaryens didn't control their dragons? And the control was the thing which was actually stopping the dragon dreams from happening. It's all speculation, but it's entirely possible. If you start to think of the Targaryens as being instinctively less about control and more about the dragon bonding, and therefore that's how their magic manifested itself, you could see the Targaryens as being actually very different to the rest of the Valyrians. So anyway, all of this is not a thing that we have huge amounts of evidence on, but we've got hints, and those hints are incredibly intriguing. And if I had to guess, the Dragonbinder was there to be controlling rather than bonding. There's a clear difference between bind and bond. This is not Dragon Bonder. This is not the one that creates the dragon bond. This is one that operates almost outside of that. So, was it that it was just for random wild dragons, or was it that some Valyrians used this in order to be controlling dragons, whereas other Valyrians didn't want to control them; they wanted to work with them? That would be my personal speculation. Yeldenil saying, "Hi, Robert and Dan the dog. I was wondering if we can consider Euron a water white and what that would mean in connection with blowing Dragonbinder. What is dead may never die, but can it boil?" I know he probably won't blow it himself. This is hypothetical. Well, let me start by just unpacking a line which we kind of skated over earlier, which was this, what was written on the side was that no mortal man shall sound me and live. George R. R. Martin loves this kind of word play, and this is obviously very much a kind of a playing on, if your mind is anything like mine, you're immediately no mortal man can. That sounds very much like the Eowyn and the Witch King over in Lord of the Rings, which is like you can claim all this power and strength because you think that no mortal man's going to kill you, but how about a woman and a hobbit? Can they do that? So the workaround for no mortal man can sound me and live is, what about an immortal man? What about a white? Who's someone who's died and come back? Might they be able to? It's possible. Would this therefore mean that Jon could, theoretically, if he dies and then comes back, is he no longer a mortal man? Can whites therefore sound it and live? If we're looking for technicalities, those are the kind of routes that we should go down. Then you get to the Ironborn, what is dead may never die idea, which is like kind of a cool little catchphrase. But so their idea, their religion is based on this sort of baptism type idea, but like you submerge somebody in the water until they're actually choked to death, and then you get the water out, and so they have died and come back. And so That's why what is dead never dies, because you've already died. And now you come through to the other side. Is that belief based on something real? Is it based on water whites in some way? And when we're saying water whites, this is just, I mean, this is something the fandom has sort of expanded out on quite a lot, which is this idea that we started off having just whites. That's what the others control. Then George R. R. Martin introduced this idea of fire whites. And he said, okay, so basically Beric Dondarrion, Lady Stoneheart, they're fire whites because they're kind of reanimated by the power of fire. And then I and others have come up with this thought that, well, the zombie mountain, is he a science white? Because this is what Qyburn has been doing, his sort of mad scientist experiments, and he seems to have figured out stuff, how to do this. And then what about the idea, could there be water whites? We get Hatchface, who is this astonishing character who everybody was thought dead because he drowned, but then he came back. Is he now a water white? So that's where the thinking comes from. Could we consider Euron a water white? I don't think he's ever really kind of claimed it. There's no hint that this is a thing for him that is different to everyone else. I mean, I wouldn't rule it out, but again, I don't see any huge indications that this is the case. I can't see any real change, particularly with fire whites and, well, with all of the whites, there are differences. Ice whites, obviously, they don't have control of their minds anymore. They've completely changed. Fire whites, George R. R. Martin is very clear. You lose something of yourself. Beric Dondarrion lost, each time he came back, he lost a bit more of his memories, of his identity as his former self. You know, there was a woman I was going to marry, but I can't remember her name or what she looked like. That kind of thing. It's really quite tragic. Lady Stoneheart has come back, and she seems to have lost all of the compassion in her heart, and she's just got this kind of drive for vengeance, really. And of course, the Mountain, he has undertaken a character change since he's come back. He's more a strong, silent type now. So we would expect there to be a change if somebody became a water white. Patchface has a huge change in character. Euron, not so much. He's remembered when he was younger by all of his family. He's remembered as still being mad, horrific, horrible. So yes, he seems to have maybe ratcheted up a notch or two, but he doesn't seem to have changed fundamentally his personality. So I like the idea, but I can't at the moment see the evidence that we've got to back that one. Ranabir Mitra saying, salutations, Robert and Dan the dog. Hope you're well enjoying this lovely summer thus far. Yes, I am. How did Euron get Dragonbinder? He most definitely didn't go to Valyria, but I believe he found it in Karth. He was operating under the alias Urathon Nightwalker, and he now suddenly possesses gallons of Shade of the Evening juice and Piet Pri strapped to the silence. He operated using a glass candle in Karth, so lots of chances of him pirating all those Valyrian artifacts. What do you think? Okay, so this is based on a theory that is out there. It's not one I've particularly come up with, but I have some sympathy with, which is Euron seems to have been extraordinarily successful during his time out in the wilderness. His very brief backstory, he got exiled. He was horrible and evil. He got exiled. And for years, he tells the story as if he's just spent his entire time raiding up and down the coasts and winning every battle, and people worship him as a god, and that kind of thing. Some have speculated that, whereas he surely did do quite a lot of that, maybe he says he went as far as Karth. Maybe he stopped there for a bit and learnt a bit of magic, maybe. And we get this guy called Urathon Nightwalker. who we only get a very brief mention of in Karth, as Arrow's own Daxos says. They say glass candles are burning in the windows of Arathon Nightwalker, which is kind of a hint that Dany's dragons being hatched has brought magic back into the world. Why might we think that Euron has access to a glass candle? Well, this would explain how he's managed to get all of these things that he can get. So having a glass candle, you seem to be able to see it as see through it in a way to far off places. You seem to be able to communicate to it. I mean, as we've seen one sort of in action, but we've not had someone sit down and explain exactly the ins and outs of how it works. But it seems if we imagine it a bit like one of the Palantiri from the Lord of the Rings, that's the kind of feel that we're going for here. You can see long distances, you can see what's going on, you can communicate with people. And that would be hugely powerful in terms of him thinking, I want to amass riches. And this is something that the more I read George R. R. Martin's story here, the more I think, yeah, this is something that's often missing from other fantasy worlds. But George R. R. Martin does drop this in every now and then. This idea that realistically, in a well-rounded world, if somebody had got access to magic, they could see far away, they could work out what to do, they could see the future. Realistically, some people will just use that to get rich, to get power. They're not all going to be wise wizards. They're not all going to be evil people trying to take over the world. Some people will just try and get money and stuff. And I think we see a bit of that. I did a Maggie the Frog video a while ago. I think we see a bit of that actually with Maggie the Frog and her family. But here, with Euron, we do get this thought, well, what if he got enough magic to be able to see, oh, if I raid over there, I can get hold of this thing. If I raid over there, I can get hold of that thing. There are also other language cues that George R. R. Martin gives us here, kind of linking him to glass candles and the like, one of which is the tall and twisty. That's what Moqorro describes him as, seeing him in his flames, and that's how glass candles are often described, tall and twisted. And if in your imagination right now you're thinking of a glass candle is like, well, it's just like candle sized. The ones we read of in that the Citadel has, they are 3 feet high. That's like around a meter. 3 feet high, tall and twisted is what we're told. So the same language cues that are given for Euron are given for glass candles. And given the fact that he's claimed he's definitely got himself a dragon horn, he's claimed he got a dragon egg, he certainly got a whole load of Valyrian steel daggers, he seems to have got himself some Valyrian steel armor. That's an astonishing haul. And it does lead you to wonder, did he go to Old Valyria, or did he just raid in the right places? Because those things, after the fall of the Valyrian freehold, those things were out there. All of the old Valyrian stuff was still out there, some of them. Most of it got destroyed, but some of it was out there in the world. And if he could find where that was and then collect it, he could then convincingly tell people that he went to Old Valyria. He's the only person who is the witness to this. His crew, tongues cut out, they can't say. So instinctively, I kind of believe that he did make this up, and he's just claiming this to make himself look really cool. But that does leave open the question of how did he get hold of the information about where to get all these things from. Having a glass candle might well work. The timing is a bit tight, it has to be said. For him sort of sitting there with this glass candle learning this, which the glass candles weren't working until the dragons were hatched, and so we have to have him learning very soon that the glass candle works very soon after Dany arrives there with her dragons, using it, getting the information, then kind of charging out, gathering all of this stuff, then getting himself over to um, the Iron Islands for the King's Moot. That is quite tight timing. It's not impossible, but it is quite tight timing. So I like the idea. I'm not 100% sold on it, but Euro has to figure it out from somewhere and somehow how he got there. The idea that he might have got this from Piet Pri and the Warlocks, this comes from there was an online wiki, not the main wiki that we know about. This was a sort of a paid thing a while ago, which was semi-canon, and that said that he got Dragonbinder from the Warlocks when he chased down their ship. Now, he definitely did chase down the Warlocks. They went out in a ship hunting after Dany. They took with them a big barrel of a Shade of the Evening that he's confiscated and is using. So that part definitely happened. Would they realistically have gone off chasing after Dany with Dragonbinder? Yeah. If you're there wanting to claim those dragons, and if you're there wanting to gain revenge on Dany, and if you had something like Dragonbinder, then it would make sense that you took it with you. So it all kind of adds up. Where did they get this from? I mean, who knows? So I suspect it's one of these things we will never ultimately find out. But the Euron got his before he got the Shade of the Evening. He definitely had some inside information about where to get all this stuff from, or he went to Valyria. And if he went to Valyria, I think he needed some extra information about how to survive. So I think it's entirely possible. I don't think we've learned the exact iteration of things yet. Rabbi Mitra also says, what are the sequence of events, according to you, that will take place when Dragonbinder is blown by Makoro or Victarion? I feel Viserion will lose his control to the Horn owned by Euron and head off to Old Town and enact the vision. From a smoking tower, a great stone beast took wing, breathing shadow fire. Let me know what you think. So, what is going to happen? Well, this is a fool's game first, obviously. The things that seem very likely is Victarion is going to land. He's going to fight the battle, the Battle of Fire, which is the second siege of Meereen, is going to be a victory for the Meereenese. Not just because the Ironborn will arrive and beat back the Yunkish, but also because Tyrion, in the pre-release chapters of The Winds of Winter, seems to have persuaded the Second Sons to switch sides. And Sir Barristan did a brave but very clever sally forth from the city to try and destroy one of those trebuchet. That seems to have been successful. All in all, the tide of the battle seems to have turned. So that's the context. Above there, two dragons, Rhaegal and Viserion, are flying. The third, Drogon, is off in the Dothraki Sea. And it seems very clear that this has to be done within earshot of dragons in order for it to work. So Drogon's safe. We forget about Drogon. There's two dragons in play. I've already said what I think Euron's plan is that he's fully expecting Victarion to blow the horn, or if Victarion figures out that he shouldn't blow the horn, then he'll get someone else to do it. And Euron has already bound the horn to himself. Victarion has got 3 slaves to blow the horn for him. I would not be surprised, but other things interacting here are Makoro will not want this to happen. Maybe he has already tried to do some clever thing to wipe Euron's bond to it. He certainly wouldn't have done what he was suggesting he might do, which is bind the dragons to Victarion. That won't have happened. But he will not want the dragon horn to be used to be taking Dany's dragons away. He is there to support Dany, so he does not want that to be used to take them away. The Dusky Woman is almost certainly on Euron's side, so is wanting the horn to be blown. So if I had to guess, then we're going to get something like Victarion is going to land the fleet, jump off with all his soldiers, and they're going to go fighting. He's happily trusting what's going on, and he says, right, just when we're fighting this battle, then blow the horn. The Dusky Woman will not be trusting Mokoro. The Dusky Woman does not like Mokoro. When she sees him, she hisses. So that's almost certainly Euron realizing that Mokoro is going to try and stop things. Mokoro, I think, will have tried to do something to prevent. Well, he won't have done the bond to Victarion. It's possible that he doesn't know that there's already a bond on that dragon horn. The Dusky Woman will go immediately, as soon as is possible. Once you can see the dragons there, she will try and get the first person to blow the horn. They do. The first dragon looks around, gets called into action in some way. Mokoro realizes this has gone wrong. There's somebody else in control over here. He stops the horn being blown any other times. So only one dragon gets affected by this. That dragon will be Viserion. Because I think we're all expecting Jon to ride a dragon, and if he does, the one that's named after his father kind of makes sense. And Viserion, named after Viserys. Viserys isn't really the best of people. Euron's not really the best of people. Again, that all kind of makes sense. So that one dragon flies off. Mokoro confiscates the dragon horn, probably kills the Dusky Woman. Victarion realizes that this has not gone to plan. One dragon's gone, isn't answering to him. Another dragon's not there at all. The third dragon is unaffected by all of this. He then, over in Meereen, gets into this really complicated situation with Sir Barristan. Tyrion's going to be there. They're waiting for Dany to return. So he's hanging out, waiting for Dany to return. But Mokoro is not going to let him or anyone else blow that horn again. Meanwhile, Viserion is flying back to Euron. And this is actually quite a long journey. This will take quite a while. And it's the kind of thing that I think George R. Martin will really enjoy showing this from a few different people's POVs. That in the same way that, if you remember, at the very end of book 1, the start of book 2, there were like 8 chapters in a row, each of which you get a character staring up at the sky and going, wow, that red comet, that must mean whatever. And then we understand a little bit about themselves because of what they're interpreting the red comet as meaning. So I could certainly see that we see from different characters' perspectives this dragon flying off and them thinking, what does this mean? Maybe we first see from Tyrion the dragon flying off. Then we see, I don't know, John Connington over in the Stormlands, maybe Cersei. She can see from King's Landing. Maybe we get Sam down in the southwest. All of these characters seeing the dragon and reflecting on what this might mean before the dragon arrives. And as I say, this is just my fan writing, but Euron has created this explosive magical battle, where he's going to summon krakens. He's making a sacrifice of his king, remember? And so he's sacrificing his unborn child, king's blood. He's got magicians and priests strapped to the front of their ships. There's going to be blood in the water, and amidst all of this, a dragon is going to come for him to control. That would look astonishing. So I don't know whether it's going to be exactly like that, but that would work for me. And then that means that we've got Euron with a dragon. And you did sort of quote from a smoking tower, a great stone beast took wing, breathing shadow fire. That a smoking tower could be Old Town if Euron takes Old Town. We've got the High Tower. We've got George R. R. Martin a couple of times in Fire and Blood gave us this image of a dragon landing on the High Tower. So he's perhaps setting that one up. A great stone beast, well, it came from stone, the stone dragon eggs. Breathing shadow fire, well, yeah, he's being controlled. It's not like proper fire. He's not a free dragon. He is being controlled by Euron because of the dragon binding, not bonding. So that all kind of works for me and adds to this idea of Euron being this apocalyptic third act secondary antagonist, the Saruman of all of this, the scouring of the Shire that will happen at the very end of the books. If he gets enough of and George R. R. Martin is only going to build up and build up and build up Euron's character until the main characters think, oh well, we've dealt with the others. The dragons have been. Oh no, hang on, we've got Euron. That's the bit where it's like, oh, we've got another bad guy to be dealing with. DickCrabb'sSquire, could it be Arya, who becoming twisted and burned inside with worms manifesting because she found a dragon horn while she was gone over in Valyria? Blowing it without the knowledge of magic could have had that effect on Targaryens, while non-Targaryens simply just cook inside. It's possible. So Arya Targaryen, remember, she climbed on the back of Balerion the Black Dread, flew, we think, all the way over to Valyria. When they return 12, 18 months later, Balerion's got this huge gash in his side, and she's got this kind of horror movie thing, worms inside her, giant worms, one the size of her forearm. This is horrific. Could this have come from blowing a dragon horn? They seem to be different things. The writing on the side of Dragonbinder isn't only true Valyrians can blow me and survive. It's about mortal men. So I don't think that we've had set up this idea that you can survive it in any way if you're a Valyrian. That's not a thing that's been set up, and the effect does seem very different. Burning lungs, yes, we get Targaryens have some kind of heat resistance, which is probably how Arya managed to survive for so long. But the wriggling worms inside seems a very different thing from burned lungs. So my instinct is no, but we don't have the evidence really. So now I've got 3 questions which are not related to Dragonbinder, but it came from patrons, so I will happily answer them. Lord Medici saying, hello, Robert. I'd like to pose my question from last week, which I think I missed, so apologies. I try to cover all the questions I get sent. Sometimes I do miss one or two, mostly just because I'm human. So in a recent video, Who is Young Griff? Aegon the Sixth or Aegon, you quote the fact that the Golden Company's, I quote the fact, the Golden Company's support for Aegon is a piece of evidence in favour of him being a Blackfire. Indeed, it would be super, super weird for them to break a contract to fight for a Targaryen, but if you were a Blackfire, this makes sense. However, in another video, Varys and Illyrio's master plan, you point out a quote by Trystane Rivers, which reveals that the Golden Company was in on the plot with Varys and Illyrio since its start, i.e. since the plan was to place Viserys Targaryen on the throne. Isn't there a tension here? We assume that the Golden Company's support for Fagon is a sign that he is a Blackfire, because they would never support a Targaryen, but it is very clear from Trystane's words that they were willing to do so. I know that Varys and Illyrio only wanted to put Viserys on the throne to weaken the realm and pave the way for Fagon, but crucially, this is not how Trystane seems to understand it. From his perspective, it seems a Targaryen restoration via Viserys was Varys and Illyrio's plan A, and they've only switched to supporting Fagon because Viserys died. Okay, so to clear this up, because I know Varys and Illyrio's plan is confusing, and George R. R. Martin acknowledges that by having the Golden Company kind of exasperated by this. So we've got a few things that I think we need to be quite clear about. You allude to this one already, which is that it would be quite weird for the Golden Company to break a contract, which they did, in order to do this if it wasn't to support a Blackfire. So that is evidence that young Griff is indeed a Blackfire. Added to which, Illyrio says some contracts are written in blood, not gold, which is, again, the implication here is that because the Golden Company were set up basically as the Blackfire continuity army, and they would, every time the Blackfires were trying to reinvade, they would be at the forefront of this. While they were hanging around waiting for the next invasion, they would go off and do contracts as a sellsword company in Essos. And they were, I mean, company motto, our word is good as golden. Our word is as good as gold. It's like, we're not going to cancel on you. Trust us, we've never cancelled. And so the fact that they did cancel for this and Illyrio says that this is because this contract was written in blood, not gold, is a very clear indication, I think, that this was because of the Blackfire connection. So I think that bit seems reasonably clear. Trystane Rivers makes clear that they had this contract from quite early on, and that they thought they were supporting Viserys taking the throne. Does this mean that actually they don't care? This is just about the Targaryens, because they thought they were putting a Targaryen on the throne. I don't personally see a contradiction here. Trystane Rivers is not the Lord Commander of the Captain General, I should say, of the Golden Company. He's in a council, but he's not the Captain General. Now, why is that important? Because they've recently had a change in Captain General. It was a guy called Miles Toyne, who we don't know huge amounts about, but this is clearly a Westerosi name. And he was the person who seems to have struck this deal with Illyrio. At some point, he died and was replaced by Harry Strickland. Now, forget Harry Strickland from the TV show, where he was kind of like a young chap. He seemed, I mean, he set his army up in nice, neat rows for a dragon to roast. But other than that, he seems like a relatively competent kind of Captain General, very good with his uniform, things like that. That is not the impression we get of Harry Strickland in the book. He is described as an old maid. He complains about the blisters on his feet. He says, we're doing this because we've agreed this contract with you, but we could have done this contract over there and we'd have all got slaves. He's clearly a long way away from this original idea of what the Golden Company were about. And he is not this kind of like, I'm doing this for honor kind of person. It's like, we're just trying to get some money. I'm just trying to get some contracts. That's the kind of feel. So it seems likely to me that the original plan, Varys and Illyrio's original plan, you're right, seems to have been we'll go across with Viserys, and the Dothraki are going to head across with the Golden Company. And at some point, Viserys is going to implode. We know what Viserys is like. People won't want him as king. However, we're going to say, you don't need to have him as king because here's another person, young Griff. Because they can come and present him. And why didn't they have him just head up the army to start with? Well, because he was actually quite young at the time. If we go by what Tyrion guesses his age to be, he would have been 11-ish then, when they were sort of hatching that bit of plot. He's probably still a little bit too young, even by Westerosi standards, to be at the head of an army. So they waited for 2 or 3 years, and then they can have him as being the head, and Viserys has gone by that point anyway. So the feel seems to have been that they agreed with Miles Toyne because this is a Blackfire. They convinced Miles Toyne this is the Blackfire, this is the next Blackfire rebellion. However, the people will accept this person if we pretend that they're a Targaryen. That seems to be the way that this was. Miles Toyne, therefore, took the sensible approach of not telling everybody in the Golden Company, shh, big secret, he's really a Blackfire. He just said, no, we're going to be doing this. Harry Strickland just took on the contract. We don't know exactly how they elect their next leaders, but it sounds like he wasn't involved in that earlier discussion. He just got, oh, here's a contract that we have to do this, so we'll do the contract. That seems to be the kind of the iteration of events. So at the moment, the Golden Company do not know that this is a Blackfire. And Varys and Illyrio, eminently practical, have decided we've got them signed up. They don't need to know. The world is not going to know this is a Blackfire. It's only us. We're going to put this guy on the throne, and we're pretending he's a Targaryen. Robbie O'Brien saying, hey, Robert, sorry I missed the tinfoil last week, but I wanted to contribute one that I recently thought of. Yeah, and as I said at the beginning of this stream, next time I do one of these pre-records, I will do a sort of open Q&A, which I'll ask my patrons as usual, but also I'll pick out some questions that we get from the comment sections here. So drop any more tinfoil things down there, and I'll pick them up. So this is Robbie's tinfoil theory. Daenerys is being set up to think that she's Azor Ahai. My theory goes that this is being orchestrated by Illyrio and Varys, and their co-conspirators are Quaithe and Miri Mazdur. George R. R. Martin always says that prophecies aren't as important as what people do in their name. I suspect that this deep state cabal has been doing everything in their power to make Daenerys out to be a prophecy child. It goes like this. Miri secures fresh, not petrified dragon eggs in a shy, because who alive today could tell the difference. She delivers these to Illyrio, who then gifts them to Daenerys with a colourful lie that promotes intrigue. Miri then puts herself on Daenerys' path to ensure she doesn't mess up hatching them. She is willing to die for this cause. The next part is Quaithe manipulating everything that goes on in Qarth, in particular in the House of the Undying. After presenting herself as an ally to be trusted, she makes sure Daenerys gets all good and high before subjecting her to a mummer's show, which depicts all the parts of the prophecy they want her to focus on, and the drugs make the show seem like a vision. The end goal is the same as it always is for Varys and Illyrio. So the people will fawn over the prophecy girl. Okay, so what do I think on this one? I don't personally think that what we've seen on Varys and Illyrio suggests that they are bought into Dany as being a prophecy girl. Is my sort of high-level take on that one. They were basically willing to start off with to just give her up for the cause, marry her off to the Dothraki. Then they thought, oh, we'll just write her off completely. She's gone off into the Red Waste. he's dead, sort of Viserys is dead, she's gone, forget her. It's only when they discover she's got dragons, that's when Illyrio starts trying to make contact and starts to get her into this plan. Did Illyrio know that he was giving real dragon eggs to Dany, and then Miri Mazdur appears and is teaching her how to... I can't see that in the text. Miri Mazdur seems genuinely scared and shocked when she realizes that Dany learned from her. She didn't give her lessons. She just, she said vague things like only death can pay for life and things like that. But she didn't say, you have to kill this person and then you have to do it when there's a red comet on. George R. R. Martin was very clear that the hatching of the dragons was not following a clear formula, that Dany was clever. Yes, she figured out the basics, but it was a miracle that it happened. It was unplanned. It was not repeatable again. So Miri Mazdur could not have set this up. In his mind, she could not have set this up for those dragon eggs to have been hatched at that way and that time. It needed the red comet. It needed Dany to be there. It needed the dragon eggs to be calling to her specifically. It needed all of those things in the exact right order. So I don't think that's the case. I think Quaithe is, if you look at what she's getting, Dany, she's not really focusing on Azor Ahai. She's focusing on Targaryen stuff. Remember who you are, Daenerys. The dragons do. She's telling her not to trust anyone. She's telling her not to trust Varys as much as anything else. So I tend to the view that no, this is what we think it is. The dragons hatching shocked everybody. This was not, no one was expecting this. But they then provided the evidence for people who were looking for that kind of thing, that she was Azor Ahai reborn. And Steve the Zero. Unrelated question, if I may, but dragon related. What do we know of the fate of the dragon Morning? It seems to be unknown at this point, other than surviving the dance. For all the praise George R. R. Martin had for House of the Dragon, he was upset with the break in law around the storyline of the dragons. And while I don't think he mentioned Rhaena specifically, it seems to be tied to how the show was taking that storyline. The name Morning has thematic resonance with the Sword of the Morning, Dawn, Lightbringer, etc. Is George R. R. Martin setting up a similar theme? I don't think these strings, so to speak, are ultimately pivotal to the end game, but George R. R. Martin's comment about tissue paper perhaps elevates this particular string to more than a theme. So this is tissue paper. This is toxic butterflies. He talked about lots of things when being unhappy with shifts in law, in how the world works in House of the Dragon. Now, yes, he seems specifically to be talking about dragons here, and dragons roaming seemed to be a thing that he was particularly concerned about. Why dragons roaming? Well, because we get on the show, we got Sheepstealer going over to the Vale. Why is that an issue? Why does this create this butterfly effect going forward? Well, because it means that Rhaena then, rather than Nettles, is the person who bonds with Sheepstealer. Why is that important? Well, we've got a knock-on effect for Daemon and Nettles' relationship. The show clearly seems to have decided to go down this idea that he will then, the Nettles role will be taken on by Rhaena, and Rhaena is his daughter, and they will, he will have a character journey. Clear prediction for season 3. He will have a character journey which brings him to a point where he can become a better father or recognize the faults of who he is as a person, that kind of thing. I'm sure Matt Smith will bring out all of his action chops and do a fantastic job with it, but that isn't really where the books go. They do leave it very vague about who Nettles is, but after he dies, she goes off with Sheepstealer into the Vale, And the hint is that she kind of lives there as this kind of like fire witch, basically. And some of the local mountain hill tribes, they start to worship her, the burned men, for example. So that's what happens to her. But Rayna, in his story, is based up in the Vale, and one of the eggs that's there hatches and grows, and this is the dragon named Morning. And this is quite a significant moment in the feel at the end of Fire and Blood, which is you started the Dance of the Dragons with 20 dragons. You end it with 4. One of those is Cannibal, that nobody's going to be riding, may well already be dead for all we know. One of those is Silverwing, who's hiding out on an island in Red Lake. Nobody's going to be approaching Silverwing. One of those is Sheep Stealer, who we know basically disappears into the Mountains of the Moon. And then we have Morning. And Morning is presented as being, this is the great hope for dragons. The Targaryens haven't lost their dragons. But this is the one that is now still in Targaryen control, or wider Targaryen family, we should probably say. And this is probably the biggest loose thread we have from Fire and Blood Part 1 is what happened there. Because within about 20 years, we get the last dragon dying. Which means that in that 20 years, those other 4 dragons have all got to have gone. Now, we can certainly imagine, as I say, Cannibal possibly already dead, we don't know. We can well imagine that somebody went and had a little check and went, oh yeah, Cannibal's died. Silverwing was starting to get a bit old for a dragon, and we know is kind of pining for Vermithor, so we could imagine that Silverwing might die as well. We know roughly what happens to Sheep Stealer. Now, I don't think anyone's going to be coming and trying to attack Sheep Stealer, but maybe they even, when they talked about the last dragon, they meant the last dragon the Targaryens controlled, because there might be one hiding in the mountains, but we just don't know. But Sheep Stealer is now out of the main narrative. Morning, we do not know what happens. Something will have to happen to Morning. Now, this intrigues me hugely, because we've got a few other loose threads. We've got Alice Rivers in Harrenhal, for example. What does Rayna do? Well, Rayna is probably going to be using this at some point in that 20 years, using the dragon as Targaryens do, and sort of go on the offensive. Is Rayna Targaryen going to take on Harrenhal in some way? Are the Maesters, who I think have been poisoning the dragon eggs during this period of the Regency, and will be thinking, we've only got to get rid of one dragon now. The other dragons, they can go. They'll probably die out on their own. But this one dragon, if this dragon has eggs, then the Targaryens will just get dragons again. We're back where we started. This is their one chance. Are the Maesters going to try and kill that dragon? We simply do not know. So this isn't mentioned at all in the world of Ice and Fire. It's not. The fate of Morning isn't there. We're just told the dragons largely died out in the Dance of the Dragons. Went from 20 down to 4, and then 20 after that. Any dragons hatching were just these kind of like deformed, spindly little creatures, and the last one of those died about 20 years later. We're not told about Morning at all. So my take is that this is going to be. Well, I'd like it to be something where the Maesters could have done it, because it's like, if they think they're on the verge of getting rid of the dragons, would they think, and probably while Morning is still quite young, would they think, okay, now's our chance? But how do you kill a dragon? Well, they know how to kill a dragon more than anyone else does. Yeah, I do wonder whether they've got some kind of knowledge that they will bring to bear, and it won't look like them. They will just kind of hush it up, but they will be the ones to kill the dragons. Okay, And with that, I think I will start drawing this one to a close. So I'll be back next week. I'll do a proper live next week. So apologies, I know the last couple of weeks we've been doing these pre-recorded ones, but I will be back doing a proper live. Do look out for the Danis the Dreamer video, which I've got coming out, I think, tomorrow. And what else have I got? What is East of a Shy will be coming out at some point soon as well. So that's something to keep an eye out for. If you like short form videos, which I'm doing on here, they're also over on TikTok and Instagram and X and various other places. So if you'd like to access them there, then do just have a look for me with the normal In Deep Geek logo. And that is about this. I'd like to thank patrons first of all for the questions and for your support. I do hugely appreciate it. Also, because this is going as live, I'm sure the moderators are there in the chat. Moderators, thank you. I hugely appreciate what you do. If you are there watching this live in the chat, please just show the moderators a bit of love because they are absolutely amazing. And what else? If you're watching this back a bit later, then appearing somewhere around here is going to be a link to other live streams that I've done. Appearing somewhere around here is going to be a link to my Patreon page, and I'll probably somewhere over my head will be a link to In Deep Sleep if you'd like to listen to these with some kind of relaxing thing like a roaring fire or something like that, rather than the visuals, just have that as a sort of little soundtrack, then please do go and check that out. But that is all for this time. Take care, everyone, and I'll see you again next week.